Hello everyone, it's Dan. This is going to be a somewhat unusual video for me. I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but this is actually going to be 40K content of all things. I don't play 40K. I haven't played 40K since like 3rd edition, back in the very early 2000s, if I even have the edition right. I played Imperial Guard back then, and I had these models kicking around that were sent to me by Wargames Atlantic from their World Ablaze line. This is their British Expeditionary Force. If you want a thorough review, I provided one of those earlier on in the year. And I was trying to think of what to do with these models. I thought about, bold action. I don't play bold action either. I'm not too bothered about that. I like having miniatures in my collection that are for game systems I might play one day. However, I was feeling very inspired by Kitbash Carnage. His buddy of mine, he's got a channel who he does a lot of, well, as the name implies, kit bashing 40K content though, and he does some really crazy like 24-hour marathons. I'll put a link in the description to his channel. You should go check him out. Really cool guy. He's got some great ideas over there. But he does a lot of, again, 40K content. And I was looking at these models, and something interesting occurred to me. Two things. One, when I played Imperial Guard, the faction I really wanted to play back in the day was Death Corps of Krieg. And of course, at the time, I guess now it's not much different if there's only the plastic kill team models, which are prohibitively expensive and difficult to get a hold of. But at the time, it was just the Forge World resin models were the only ones that you could get your hands on. So I always told myself if I ever got back into 40K, I would just bite the bullet and do a Krieg army. But something interesting, I was staring at these figures, and there's two things. One, the rifle in particular, really looks like the Krieg rifle, which makes sense because the Death Corps is like aesthetically like kind of World War I Germans. I mean, that's certainly what they're going for. So the rifles make sense as like early 20th century kind of alternate history variants, right? So it makes sense that the Enfield kind of looks like a Krieg las rifle, even that it's got the magazine sticking out, very large bayonets on them. But two is that I think if I paint these up right, they also kind of look like Cadian shock troops to me. Like here, like even like look at the boot design, right? The top torso here, especially with this this piece on the front that is for a gas mask. I think if I paint this up with some mild conversions, if I paint this up right, I think that I can make these look like alternate Cadians. So that's what we're going to do here. I just wanted to show you these models ahead of time. I'm going to do a quick step here where I show how to sculpt on shoulder pads, which is I think the only piece that I really need to kind of complete the illusion, and then we'll finish up the rest with paint. But all I've done, I just wanted to show you these models ahead of time. These are just straight out of the box with, I guess, two exceptions that I'll show you in just a moment. But straight out of the box, British Expeditionary Force. I guess actually that's a commando body, but you could do this purely with the Expeditionary Force kit. So there we go. So just lots of rifles. And in terms of other conversion work, I had thought about like picking up some 40K bits to give them like a plasma gun or a melta gun. Again, I don't play 40K, so I'm not too bothered about whether this is street legal or not. But I wanted to keep it as close to out of the box as possible, just to make these conversions as straightforward as possible. So the only handful of changes I made is I made like what I guess would be a Vox caster. I just glued on this kind of piece to a backpack there. I think if I were doing this purely for myself and not trying to, make it as simple as possible, I would just pick up some, Imperial Guard bits and throw the actual Vox caster backpack on there. But that worked just fine, I think. This Lewis gun here, I thought actually looked like a melt gun. And again, we'll use paint to kind of finish that concept. But I also had this little, I don't know, barrel thing that I glued on to make it look a little more sci-fi. I guess it makes it more unwieldy and difficult and practical to use. But then otherwise, I had this like grenade launcher bit that I added to this unit champion guy. Otherwise, he was built straight out of the box. I did also have a sword in a scabbard that I added on. But otherwise, so you can see, like, again, I really do think that from a starting point, you could start with bits purely out of the box here. So what we're going to do now is a little bit of green stuff work. Don't let that intimidate you. This is really simple stuff. I'll take you through step by step if you've never dealt with this before. And we're going to sculpt on some simple shoulder pads, and then we're going to move into the paint phase, because I think that's really where we're going to finish the illusion here. I think the end result will look pretty neat. So what you'll need for this is some green stuff. This is not Citadel green stuff. I found this on Amazon for like 20 bucks, and I keep it in a Ziploc bag. And as a result, I bought that roll, I think like 5 years ago, and it's still good. But what you'll do is cut off a little piece, and then especially if it's been sitting for a while, I'll do the center piece where the green and the blue touch each other. I usually just cut a sliver out just because it can tend to get a little bit hard over time anyway. And then the rule of thumb, if you've never worked with green stuff before, I know it's intimidating if you've never dealt with it, but you want to keep everything wet. Your hands should be wet. You can see my hand going off to the side there. I'm constantly going and like dipping my fingers in water, just because it gets very tacky and it'll stick to your fingers. It'll stick to your tools, stick to your models where you don't want it to, unless you keep it wet. And I don't mean like soaked, but you can see it's just damp always. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm squeezing together these two pieces. And then after about a minute, you'll see it turns to this green color. And then I roll out a little ball here. And so all we're going to do in terms of conversion work is create these shoulder pads. And this first one that I'm doing, I'm deliberately making it like probably 50% larger than I would normally. And I'll show you all the finished models at the end once the shoulder pads are all sculpted on. But you're going to take a little ball, and you can see what I'm doing there is I just squished it down gently into the rough shape of a shoulder pad. You really want like the top part to be curved like the Cadian flak armor. And then take your tool to kind of push out any rounded areas you want it to be, especially like the part that's touching the torso. You don't want to look soft. I don't know how else to word that. But then you're going to take your X-Acto knife and cut a hard straight line across the bottom, just like I did there. And then likewise, again, I don't know how to word this, but that you want like sharp edges wherever the curve stops. I don't, again, hopefully you can see what I'm talking about there. And as I said, these are slightly too large because I wanted it to be visible. I'll do one more example here that's probably closer to the proper scale for this. But again, likewise, again, you can see here, like the most important part is at the top be rounded. And then you kind of squish it down as in like toward the base of the models where you're shifting the green stuff down so that any excess gets cut off here, where again, you're going to cut a straight line across. And you're trying to approximate the size of the shoulder pad that you just did, because that's the most important piece. Even if between models, the shoulder pads are slightly different sizes, it's important that the shoulder pads be roughly the same size on the model itself. So you can see here, again, talking about like rounded edges, I'm trying to squish down gently, because if you squish too hard, you're going to leave an indentation with your X-Acto knife. And then the same rule applies, like again, with dipping your fingers in water, you should be dipping your X-Acto knife in water constantly. Otherwise, the green stuff will stick to it. Here's another example. This is actually the 10th of the 10 models I did. And you can see that shoulder pad is more correct in scale. But it's the same principle here, which is that I'm going to take a ball shape. I'm going to squish it onto the shoulder gently, kind of create a rounded top to it. And then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut a hard line along the bottom there and get rid of any excess. Flatten it down so that and again, gently, you don't want to squish too hard. It's really malleable at this stage. After like 20 minutes, it starts getting hard. And after probably a couple of hours, it's fully hardened. And then one thing I did here, you can see I make a little divot there with the tip of my X-Acto knife, just two little dots on either side, just to, again, create the illusion of some kind of, rivet that's bolted onto the armor in some way. And here you go. So yeah, it took about, 3 or 4 minutes per model. So yeah, it was about half an hour all in to do all of these figures. And I think the end result looks pretty neat. But where we will really sell this effect, I think, is going to be in painting the figures. So you could also, you see the one model there with the chest, I had green stuffed on just a little piece as well to represent flak armor. Because again, I know that most of these just have uniforms showing underneath, but when we paint them, I think we can make it convincing that this is all like armor that's on their torso there without any green stuff work. But if you like, you could like cover up the collar of the figures. But I don't think it's strictly necessary. I think when you build it, it's easier just to take that like gas mask piece and glue it up a little bit higher to make it all look like it's flak armor. I realized too, as I was getting ready for this painting session, that this is the first time in a while that I've had called a limited palette. I think there's just like 8 or 9 paints that I'm going to use for all of these figures, which is very unusual. Again, usually I'm doing like Ancients and Dark Age figures, so I've got like 20 and 30 paints for a unit. But in this case, there's just those 8, I guess 9 with White Scar. So I'm using Death Guard green. So because of my painting style, I gotta think of a name for it because it's, again, like as with Slap Chop, it is its own thing where I'm gonna put all these base colors down. I'm gonna dry brush in white. I'm gonna wash it, and then that'll be it. But as a result, just like with dipping models, which this evolved out of, you have to start with slightly brighter colors than you would normally. So normally, if you're working up with traditional highlight progressions, you would start with like a Xandri dust base for the khaki, and you would start with the Cabalan green, I think is what Citadel calls for the green color. However, they're too dark, so as a result, I went with slightly lighter variants of those same hues. And so we went with Death Guard green, which is a base color. It's again, the newer Citadel base colors I find are not like the early ones. Like Mephiston Red's probably got like the best coverage of any base color, but it was one of the first ones they made. This one is a base color, but I found it needed like 2 or 3 coats over white, 2 thin coats, in order to get it to have the correct coverage. But you want a nice even coat, and you can see there, I would normally not start with the armor because usually I'm like working my way up, dressing the model. However, in this case, because we need to get into like the nooks and crannies where the uniform is, we're trying to create the illusion that it's flak armor. I had to like get in with the green, like between the backpack, kind of above where some of the uniform touches. So anyway, that's why we did the Death Guard green first. Likewise, instead of Xandri dust, we're going to start with a brighter khaki color. We went with Krieg khaki, which I think is pretty suiting. And so yeah, we're going to do just the uniform parts that are exposed to the legs and the arms. So remember, we're not going to paint the uniform on the body in this color. We wanted that to look like it's flak armor, which I think it already does just from the colors we've applied so far. But certainly once we wash it all, I think it'll blend together very nicely. So yeah, likewise, 2 thin coats of that. And then I did some experimenting with these backpacks so that you don't have to, which is I found that Steel Legion Drab is the best backpack color, but any kind of like, again, Graveyard Earth is another approximate variant of this, but a nice kind of neutral gray-brown color like this worked well for the top of the backpack. You can also paint those straps. They go down onto the shoulders of what we are calling flak armor, but I didn't. In this case, I think it looks better just kind of tacked on like that. And then for the bedroll, I also did some color experimentation. You could really paint this whatever color you want, but I thought that from a color theory standpoint, a nice dark brown color worked well here. So I went with Rhinox hide for the bedroll. And you can see we're kind of working across the colors that I displayed out earlier. We're going to work, like the very last thing we're going to paint is black for the straps and stuff. So we're kind of painting all the accoutrements first. So XV88 is the color that I used for the rifle. And I'm also going to use for like wood handle on the entrenching tool, and I guess the knife handle as well. You know, maybe from my other videos, I normally use Xandri dust for like any kind of wood grain, but I think that this is a nice orangey brown color. Looks much better for a futuristic Enfield rifle, is what we're suggesting here. So again, there, the handle on the entrenching tool is also getting this color. And then we're moving into skin colors. If you're using all Citadel paints, Cadian Flesh Tone works just fine here. You don't want to start with like Bugman's Glow unless you want a darker skin, because again, what we're going to do in the end is wash the model, so it's going to darken it all down. So start with a lighter color than you would normally, just like we did with the armor and the fatigues. But I'm using, this is Rin Flesh. This is another one that I'm shocked is still good, because this, I know when I bought this paint back when I was playing War Machine, which was in like 2012. So yeah, this paint is like 12 years old and still great. I think it's got pretty good coverage. But as I said, you would, if you're just using Citadel colors, I would recommend Cadian Flesh Tone, or whatever it's called, something like that. And you can see there, I'm painting all of the exposed skin, like even like the back of the neck there. Some of these helmets have hair and stuff and all. If you do have that, I would just use that same scorched brown color. There's really not much. Or if it has like a mustache, I would do that too. And then silver bits, I'm using Lead Belcher, nice dark silver color. There's the canteen I painted in silver, and the bayonet, the top of the rifle, I'm painting in silver. And then some other little bits and bobs. I think on this model I missed the buckles, stuff like that, but that's really the only things that I would paint in silver on this model. But the most important bit is you want to make sure you get the top of the gun and the bayonet. Everything else could really be painted. Like you can even do like black for the canteen if you like. But I thought a little bit of variation would look nice there. You could also use a slightly brighter silver color. Whatever you choose. This is what I went with. And then finally we're moving into black. So this should be the very last color that you've got to paint, other than any like stenciling work we might do on the shoulder pads. I think, again, from a color theory standpoint, I think that like Rhinox hide would also look really good. A nice dark brown color for the boots, for the belts, straps, stuff like that. But I have to admit, as soon as I painted the black on, again, following kind of like Games Workshop's progression for Cadians, I think that the black has a nice futuristic look to it. That's what I ended up doing for all this. And so here now we're going to move into some freehand work on the shoulder pads. I named this unit, the regiment, the 401st, primarily because 401 is easy to stencil. So that's what we're doing here on the shoulder pad. If you've not seen any of my other videos on freehanding, it's the same concept here as it would be on a shield, which is that you are going to go into it knowing you're not going to get it right. You're going to roughly put in the shape that you want, or in these cases, the numbers that you want. And then you're going to go back with your original base color to clean up any rough edges and kind of generally straighten things out. So on the right shoulder pad, I'm doing 401. You could see I did the upright lines first because I'm doing it kind of like typeface. So yeah, I'm going to do upright lines to make the 401, kind of squared off looking numbers. And then I turned the model sideways to do the top and bottom of the 0 and the cross section on the 4. On the left shoulder pad, I did Roman numerals. Don't ask me what happened to it gets units 1 through 3. I just thought that the aesthetic of Roman numeral 4 looked pretty cool. And so then I'm taking pure white. I used Corax white for the base. You could just use pure white out of the gates, but I think you probably need like 3 coats if you do it that way. Whereas with Corax white, you can do 1 coat of Corax white and then 1 coat of pure white. This is game color white, just flat white. Yeah, I'm just stenciling over the line that I put in before. So again, Corax white first, and then white scar or whatever, just pure white color you've got, go back over it. And then I'm taking that same Death Guard green color, and I'm going back in and tidying up the lines that I put in. I actually did a surprisingly stable job the first time I went through. Normally I have a lot of cleanup work to do with the base color that I'm coming back in to cut in with. But that's all you're doing here is just taking whatever your base color was and cutting back in. And it's possible you need to then go back in. Like if you slip here, you might have to go back with the white. That's perfectly fine. That's normal with freehanding work. So then I took just some bright silver there. There's not very much silver on these models, but I just did like the tops of the bayonet, guns. Any silver bits that are exposed, take a bright silver to brighten it up. Because on this step, which is dry brushing white, very light dusting of white, if you've not seen my other videos with this technique that I do, I'm just taking pure white and dry brushing over the entire model just to pick up the raised edges a little bit. And as I have said, and we'll probably keep saying, that it looks kind of silly at this stage, but the goal is to kind of pre-highlight some of this stuff, so that when we do a heavy wash or a dip, if you want to use that method, it creates, I think, a slightly nicer effect. Instead of just being all dark, you'll have some light areas to contrast with it. So I'll go through and dry brush the entire model like that, and then if you like, I come in and do just like a dot highlight of pure white on some of the uppermost raised edges, which again, this is all going to get mellowed out at the wash step. But at this stage, it looks a little bit strange. But yeah, you're just deliberately creating some extreme highlights to create contrast that will exist once the model gets washed. And all of this white area gets like pigmented, tinted, kind of a brownish color because of the wash that we'll use at the next step. And I was reviewing the footage for this. I realized I do paint the eyes on these guys. At the end of the wash step, there's a matte varnish that I recommend you use. I don't know what happened to the footage for it, though. In editing this video, it's gone. But it's the same step you'll see in any of my other painting videos, which is that after this heavy wash that we're applying here, you can just use Agrex or shade, whatever you got. It's just important that you very heavily wash the entire model. You'll go through to a matte varnish. I use Army Painter matte, and I have not dared to try that Vallejo matte varnish again yet, but I will at some point just for the sake of science. And then painting eyes is, I won't say easy, it just takes practice, which is that you take a very fine detail brush, do 2 dots of white, as you would imagine, And then you're gonna, for the pupils, the black part, you're gonna do center, kind of top of the eyes, what you're gonna aim for. And I screw up all the time, in which case I usually like create a scar. I'll just take some like skin tone and then go back in. And then here we go. I cut to the finished models. I did my standard basing. And this is, yeah, the Fightin' 401st. This is the Brawlin' Brodies, if you like. And yeah, I thought they turned out pretty cool. I might end up expanding this into a slightly larger force. I thought if I do Krieg, I might pick up some World War I stuff from Wargames Atlantic to mock up some Krieg models. I think I could do that with their Germans and their French, kind of blending those. So as ever, thanks for stopping by and hanging out with me, guys. And until next time, happy gaming.